On behalf of MC Squared, I want to welcome you. I've been analyzing some of the PARCC data from last year. What we're noticing is that oftentimes questions that kids may have missed may not be because they couldn't engage with the mathematical content. Sometimes it was because the technology enhancements may have gotten in the way, especially the editor type questions. I want to first show you a document. It has a lot of the information, and this will reinforce your notes when you go back to look at them. Okay, at the very end of the document, I have included some opportunities for practice. For example, any multiple choice questions, they can get additional practice going to the 2016 practice items or release items, and here's the question numbers for each kind of manipulation type, the ones that we'll be reviewing. I am going to lead off first by going straight to the website. So here's the site that you'll go to get to the tutorials. Here's where you click on, you get to the tutorial. Here there's online tutorials. I do want to point out the equation editor tutorials are here, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. But the online tutorials are grade level or grade band specific. So I'm going to click over here to the grade 6, 7 grade band. If you notice across the top, there's some navigation issues that we will talk about as we go along. Most kids know already that they can move forward or backward with the keys up here. All right, so the first one we're going to be looking at here is multiple choice and multiple select questions. Kids have been doing multiple choice questions on a computer for a long time. If they've done map testing or some of the IXL or some of those others, they've been doing multiple choice. The multiple select means that there will be 2 or more selections within a range of questions. Now, please notice these little dials are square as opposed to a circle. Kids may or may not have noticed that. So whenever they see a square, they know that they have to hit more than one answer, usually 2, sometimes even 3. Sometimes it'll say select each correct answer or select all that apply. And at this time, I'd like to come over here and showcase the answer eliminator. So this X will allow a student to eliminate choices. For some kids, it's a distractor. But to undo it, make sure the eliminator is dark and they can undo by clicking on it. I'll talk about the review. Each question that is answered, the yellow dial will go away. So on question 2, it didn't have an answer. It was just a hint question. But at the end, it might be a good idea for students to review and see which ones are not answered. They could also bookmark questions. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to actually answer. I'm just randomly selecting some choices here just so that you can see. I now have some questions answered. Maybe on question 6, I'm not sure of the answer. So I'm going to bookmark. It means I'm just highlighting that I want to come back to it. So when I come over here to the review, I see there's a bookmark there. Okay, the bookmark just tells me I might have answered it, but I'm not sure, or I want to come back to it. When I'm all done before the test is submitted, I might come back to my review function just to see which ones are answered, which ones are bookmarked because I had a reason to want to come back to that question. Okay, again, to undo it, I just hit the review function. All right, so the next kind of question will be a drag and drop question. So drag and drop kinds of questions are pretty intuitive for kids, especially gamers. All they do is just grab it and move it. So then they allow you an opportunity to have kids practice. Now this one would involve both mathematical content and manipulation or enhanced feature because they have to put those in order and drop them into the right spaces before they would get a correct answer. So there's kind of a twofold thing happening there. The next one is the equation editor. There's 2 kinds of editors. This is one kind of manipulation that really does trip kids up. The basic editor is for entering math content. Usually a square will come up and they have to put a number into the square. It will have mathematical symbols and numbers only. There's no text allowed in this box. So you see this little arrow? Kids have to know that they can click the arrow to get other features like a less than symbols, maybe a degree symbol or this division or slash bar entered into the basic editor. So a feature of the basic editor that I'd like to call to your attention is the fraction bar. If I click fraction, look what happens. In the box, I'm going to put 2, and then in the bottom box, I'm going to move down and I'm going to put 3. Okay, suppose I wanted that 2/3 to be part of an an equation that I might be putting into my basic editor. If I put the plus sign, notice where the plus sign ends up being, it goes in the denominator. If I do not want it in the denominator, okay, so I'm going to undo, okay, these bars here, I'm going to undo that. I have to hit the right arrow key and notice what happened to my cursor. My cursor was raised to above the denominator. So now I can put my plus sign in and continue with whatever I was going to put in. Maybe I put a 4. Okay, then hit the equal sign over here and continue with my equation. So if I hit, for example, the third root, if I put inside there, let's say 8. If I hit the plus sign is again going to go under the third root symbol. I don't want it there. So there's no back button represented here. So I have to hit an undo. I want that operator to be outside. So I hit the right hand key and it should get it out. Okay, I wanted it here. Okay, so another feature of this editor is no spacing. Tells you space is not allowed in this response. Okay, the open-ended one will allow text and operation symbols. Again, these symbols here, this undo is your backspace. If I want to redo without having to retype, I can hit the redo. If I want to trash the whole thing or clear the whole thing, I can hit trash and the whole thing goes away. All right, so let's say down here I had 4 plus 3, and then I hit equals 7, for example. 7. And then I can also just put I can type words and symbols will go into the extended one. It's text and math. Okay, so this is the one that will come up a lot for explain your answer, show your work. Okay, something that I'd like to call your attention to over here is the editor for 6th and 7th grade has math symbols. If you don't want the symbols, you can make them go away by clicking there. It'll have relational symbols, which are the less than, greater than, similar, not equal to. Again, to make them go away, just click it. There's some geometry symbols, array, align, naming it, the name of an angle, measurement of the angle, parallel lines, perpendicular. Angle, let's say ABC, A, B, C. And if they're explaining their thinking, they can use the geometry symbols or even the relational symbols. Okay, is similar to something else. Okay, the math symbols are there. The text symbols, they'll use their keyboard for. But also there's a slider here. So if I want to have all of the symbols open, I can have them open all at the same time, and the slider will allow me to get to them. If the question isn't involving geometry, I may not want the geometry slider or these other sliders, so I can just shut them down. I can shut down all of them and leave it open. So if kids do not know that these are there and available to them, they may not have even clicked over here to the math symbols. That's probably the one that they will use most. But again, if they're not aware, they're not going to use them. I showed you earlier on the right-hand side of the Pearson site where the tutorials were. There are tutorials specifically for grade bands, a 3 through 5 grade band, a 6 through 8 grade band, and a high school grade band for extra practice with the tutorial. There's tutorial and then there's extra practice questions. All right, this one is just practicing the basic editor where they're going to enter number values only or math values and math symbols. Okay, then the next one is extra practice with the basic version. This one is a fill in the blank. Say that I have this question and I want to call attention to what they're asking for. I can hit the pointer and come over here and highlight this, how many plastic bags, and make it pink or blue. So this might help a kid to narrow into what the question is asking for so that the response they put in the box actually answers the question. If you want to take the highlighting away, you can highlight it and hit the value, that key that's a slash key. In some of the questions, they're going to have a number line that looks just like this. They can actually click on the spot and an answer or response will appear. If they want to change that answer, all they do is click on another spot. There's no undo or anything. And it's called a hotspot item. Then the next one is the specialized hotspot for coordinate planes. So for this question, they're looking at a ratio question, I believe, if I read it correctly. They come over here and they will just put an answer in the space. So they just put a dot. They're going to see this blank grid and they're going to think, okay, so what do I do with it? They have to know that they can click on it and create a grid hotspot. Okay, this next one is inline choice items. Some people call them drop-down menus. Okay, so if they click on this drop-down, answers will come up. Okay, on this particular question, the question is not going to receive any score unless both these drop-downs have answers in both choices. I'm going to get 0 points. Your students should probably guess, because if this question were worth 2 points, one for each drop-down, at least they might get 1 point as opposed to 0 because they didn't answer one of the drop-downs. So the drop-downs have to have all answers, 2, 3, how many ever drop-downs there are. Okay, the next one is coordinate plane items, and this one is similar to a hotspot, only in order to activate the hotspot, see if I click around here, I know I'm going to get a blue dot because this one has been activated. If I'm here, I click and I'll get a purple dot. Okay, but if the area is not activated, I won't be able to put a dot in there. So point P is 3, 4, 3, 4. Okay, and then if I want to answer to point Q, 12, 10, 12, 10, way up here. Okay, so I have my 2 points activated. So if any of you also teach Algebra 1, there will be some same kind of question, except instead of calling them coordinate plane items, they're called function items. And they have to activate to the left over here. Okay, so then this next one is just practicing, and they give them 4 opportunities to practice that skill of clicking. I put there, and then I hit B and C. And maybe the third one. Okay, and again, the colored dots will correspond with the colors on the left grid. Okay, the next one is bar graph items. The first thing I'd like to point out is the default is not 0. If for some reason one of these said 0, they need to pull it all the way back so that it records 0. Another nice feature is the fact that it gives you the label and it gives you the value. The number of dogs that were black was 3. If I want, I grab it and slide it. Okay, another thing that you might want to point out to students is the scale down here. This is 5. This is 2.5. For every different question, I would call attention to making sure the kids are very aware of what increment they're dealing with. The next question is a histogram question. Notice all of them were at the same level, and kids may think that that's the 0 level. Let's say that this range was 0. They need to pull it back down. But again, when we first started out, all of them were here. And for some reason, some kids think, well, that's where it's starting. That's my 0 point. I can move up and down from there. They need to be very, very well aware that that's not the case. It doesn't default to 0. Next one is interactive number line. So it'll always put my value here on 0. So if I click here, it starts there, and I can stretch either way from there. So maybe my response is greater than -2, but less than or equal to 2. So notice that this remove button did not come up until I selected one of them. Then the remove button comes up. There's a protractor that'll come up. They grab it and they can move it, say that they were measuring an angle. Okay. There's a centimeter ruler that'll come up, and again, they can grab it in case they were measuring something. They can slide it around by just holding it down and grabbing it. Up here in the right-hand corner, there's a drop-down. There's a large magnifier. A kid who has some issues seeing the smaller text can grab it and magnify. Unfortunately, the magnifier section is kind of small, so it makes it a little cumbersome. In some of the 8th grade tests, there will also be a calculator up here. Unfortunately, the calculator keys are very small, and the magnifier does not magnify the calculator. Something else They can change the whole background. The black on white default can come back to the original. They can change it to however they want it. Feature here is they want to mask what they're reading. Some kids use this feature. Make it larger. They need to mask one line at a time, and they would pull it down one line at a time. Okay, a feature of this particular space is the sign out, and you might tell kids, don't even go there because you'll invalidate your test. Sometimes it'll be an emergency and they'll need to leave for a bit. They can sign out temporarily, but we really probably don't want kids to even know that. I think we've covered all the top features here. So the next one is going to say that the session is ended. Before a student hits submit final answer, I would strongly advise that they go in and check out which questions. Here they should have 0. All questions should have been answered, and if not, here's a chance to look over which ones didn't get answered. And a nice feature of this is they can go directly to that question without having to use the back arrow keys or forward arrow keys. They can go back immediately to the question that didn't have a response. They can also look at their bookmarked questions. Okay, maybe question 6 was a bookmarked question, and they can look to see, well, I bookmarked this, I'm not sure why, but maybe I wasn't sure of the answer. So again, before they hit submit, advise them to go back, look at the not answered questions. Hopefully that should be 0. There are 3 test sections in the 6th grade test. So for each section, as they navigate through, there'll be a different number of questions. You can see, well, I had 22 questions. I didn't answer 9 of them, so I better go back before I hit submit. I'm going to go back to this handout. The back and forward keys, the review button is important, the bookmark. The pointer will allow you to highlight. The protractor, the centimeter ruler, the answer eliminator, that top right corner that will give you some extra functions. Multiple choice, pretty easy. Multiple select. Notice that there were squares. The drag and drop was pretty intuitive. The basic editor for grade 6 and 7 that you should remind kids about is the arrow key. The arrow key will open extra. If they want to shut it down, click it again and it'll shut back to this basic editor. The open response, they have extra. They have relation symbols and geometry symbols. Click it to open it. Click it to close it. Entry of a fraction in a mixed number, you will not have problems. The addition sign will automatically move over. A mixed number doesn't have additional features on the denominator as a fraction entry would allow. Tutorial, here's where you get to it. I put the link there. A feature of fill in the blank is that negative numbers can be entered, but you cannot enter a fraction into the fill in the blank space. If you do enter a fraction or something that's not allowed, there will be an error message that tells the kids what they can and can't do. A hotspot will happen when there's a blank grid or a blank number line. They won't know that they can activate something. The drop-down menus, we talked about coordinates, plain items. Usually if it's multiple points, there'll be multiple colors. The bar graph and histogram, interactive number line is they can stretch to plot a less than or equal to, again, the review button. Kind of question that was not showcased in the tutorial, called a matrix type item. Kids need to know columns or row, because some questions will say select 1 response per column, which means that they have to have 1 answer in the column or 1 response per row. Some dials are circles, which may confuse some kids if you hound on them that all the answers for multiple select are square. That is one question type that is not featured in the tutorial. And there are questions like this on the mid-school exam. All right, so here's some opportunities for practice. To get to the practice items, here's the website. The difference between practice items and release items. The practice items came out, I'd say late September. The release items are actually operational test questions that were released by the company. They are test questions that came straight off of the test that was given last spring. In 2016, there's practice items that you can still get to by going to the Pearson site. In 2015, there were also practice items That was when the test was in 2 different test windows, EOY end of year or PBA performance-based items. Now, these practice items are gone. You cannot get to them on the Pearson website. But all of these questions were archived on the MC Squared website. What we did with these, we had copy-pasted them 1 question per page. They can be found here at the MC Squared website. And here's the pathway. On the left-hand corner, there's standards-based resources. Then it'll say MC Squared PARCC resources. And at the very top of the page, there'll be current and archived PARCC resources. And there'll be EOY PBA. As I scroll down here, multiple choice questions. The U stands for the unit 1, because the 6th and 7th grade tests have unit 1, unit 2, or unit 3 questions for grade 6 or grade 7. The release items are the operational test items for last spring, and there was a bunch of them. For multiple choice, there was lots of grade 7 items that were released. Multiple select are those that 2 or more answers per question, and they did release quite a number of practice items, 5 operational releases for multiple select. The drag and drop had fewer 6th grade items. They only practice itemed 1 drag and drop and 1 release item. For 7th grade, there was not any practice drag and drop. For grade 7, there were 3 from the operational release. Equation editor practice, there's quite a bit. For the basic editor, these are the question numbers where you can get extra practice. For the open response or the longer editor type response boxes, there's quite a few also. For the practice items, there's quite a few. The kids can manipulate them and actually go in and fill things in. For the release items, they can. Okay, so fill in the blank. There's lots of fill in the blank questions for grade 6 on the release items and the grade 7. Hotspot items, in grade 7, there's 1 release item that had a hotspot. Keeping in mind that the hotspot for the coordinate system is different. It has a different name, although you're doing the same thing. It's a hotspot. The drop-down menus, there's quite a few practice questions that the kids can get experience with the drop-downs. There were a number of release items from last spring that also have drop-down menus. The histogram, there's 1 place where kids can practice in 6th grade the histogram item. So if you're a 7th grade teacher and you want them to practice a histogram item, you can go to the 6th grade test instead of the 7th grade test. Coordinate graph items, remember, were just the hot spot for plotting a point. So there's a couple of opportunities to practice in grade 6. There weren't any on the grade 7 practice tests, but again, they can go back to the 6th grade test if you want them to practice those. The interactive number line was where they decide whether something is less than, greater than a plotted value on a number line. There were no practice questions or release items for using that interactive number line. All right, another feature that you may or may not be aware of are the student work or anchor papers. Okay, over here where it says standards-based resources, you would click there and then come down here. It says MC Squared PARCC resources. If you click there, it takes you to this page. And up at the very top, it says preparing for spring 2017, which are going to be up here. These are the most recent practice tests that were released in late September. We processed them 1 question per page so that students could use the thinking protocol on them, which is a protocol where kids answer alone, share with a partner, and then share with each other how they answered it, and then maybe share whole group. First link that I gave you on the notes document was this. So I came over here to test prep. Where I got the tutorials was by clicking here. Okay, the tutorials again are by grade band, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, high school tutorial. Show them how to manipulate and get extra practice with the equation editor. There are also equation editor guidelines that are paper pencil. So if I click on these, I get a paper pencil explanation or instructions. Down here, online tutorials. So if you want your kids to do these, that's where you'd come to the tutorial just to get them to practice using manipulation tools. Okay, if you want to look at just the forward, backward, pointer, calculator, all of those others, they can do the test nav tutorial. In the interest of time, you probably could showcase these tutorial manipulations. Recommendation would be to come to your grade level appropriate area, click it, go through these with your whole group, maybe project it so that they see what's available. Then take them to the lab and let them play with it individually so that they can have some one-to-one practice. If you do it whole group, you can point out some features for the entire class that they may or may not find by practicing on their own. If I click here, come down to practice tests, the practice test will take you to an area. You're a teacher that teaches multiple content areas. You can do the language arts practice. I'm going to click 6th grade. 6th grade has 3 different practice tests that kids can do. At the bottom, there's an answer key for each practice test. Practice tests are not scored for students on the computer, but if they want to check afterwards, you might make an answer key. They answer on the computer, but they also answer on paper. If you click here, it'll take you to, like, for example, Unit 1. The first one is drop-down menus. So kids would actually be able to manipulate these and answer. There's one of those hotspot ones. There's opportunities for them to practice some of these manipulations. They see a square, they hopefully will know that they have to have at least 2 of these clicked, not just one answer. And that's not real intuitive for kids because they've been doing the multiple choice where they're only allowed one answer, and this one allows them to pick as many as might apply. And in some cases, it might be all of them. They have to be a little bit more cautious when they see that square. But here's a really good question. A lot of kids missed this one when we did the analysis. And oftentimes, see here, it's asking for the volume. Their gut tells them just do 4.5 by 5 by 3 3/4 and get an answer. What you need to point out is what's the key or what's the scale. Each of these blocks that are 1/4 inch. So they need to be careful and always read to see if there's a key, because that's certainly going to be a factor in their answer. I believe it was question 39 on the operational test last spring. Lots of kids missed it in the state and a lot of kids in different districts that we've worked with. What I am talking about is an evidence statement graph that is available from PARCC. Your test coordinator should have it. It gives the items missed most on the test. So in 6th grade, I believe there was like 64 questions. On the test, it tells you which one was missed most often for everyone who took PARCC. And then you can actually see how your school site or your district did. Your district would have a green dot if 2 6th grades in multiple sites. Your site will be an orange triangle. You can look to see which questions did my kids miss most. This particular type of question was missed a lot. And I think not because they don't know how to do volume, but because the key might have caused problems. Another feature that kids need to know about, a toggle over here called Exhibit. If I click it, up will come the reference sheet for that grade level. This reference sheet can be used by students right now. You don't have to wait until test time. Kids should be using it and getting familiar with where to find formulas. When the test time comes, most often test coordinators will give you this in hard copy format, but hopefully you will have already been using it with your students to get them comfortable what is on that reference sheet. It is open right now to be able to be used. Some extra features. There's some passages that are read and they need to be able to hear them so they can change the volume. This is changing text to speech. So these, again, are probably more useful for language arts testing.